Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended Podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge. And I am so excited to be partnering once again with the team at Optilogic. Now, we did another LinkedIn Live together back in March, which was a really great discussion around optimizing your freight strategy to be faster, smarter, and more profitable. Now, you can go and check that out on the Let's Talk Supply Chain YouTube page. So head over, check that out. And I also had Don Hicks on Let's Talk Supply Chain back in 2023 for a truly fun and memorable chat. Now, that was episode 376. If you want to go check it out wherever you listen and watch Let's Talk Supply Chain. But today we're diving into supply chain decision making, because the way we've been making decisions no longer works. Smart companies are moving away from gut instinct based reactions to strategically aligned, data driven, tech powered decisioning, and they're using it to get ahead of the competition. So today we're going to be sharing how you can follow suit. From priority setting to collaborative scaling, we'll be talking you through the key aspects of bringing people, process, data, and tools together so your business can lean into continuous optimization and ensure your supply chain decision-making is a long-term capability, not just a short-term project. And today I'm joined by Diana Orrego, VP of Supply Chain Modeling and Optimization at Cencora, and Sarah Butler, Engagement Lead at Optilogic, who will be shining a light on all of it today for us. So welcome, ladies. Awesome. So I want to let everybody know, if you're watching us anywhere on either my personal LinkedIn or the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn, make sure to let us know where you are tuning in from. We want to see that. And if you're loving the conversation today, make sure to give us a fire emoji. And if you have any questions, put those in the comments as well, because we're going to get to those just a little bit later on in the show. So now let's get to know the ladies on the panel today. So Diana, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us about yourself, your role at Cencora, and what your team is responsible for?
Okay, so thank you, Sarah and Optilogic, for having me today, and congratulations on your book, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm Diana Orrego, and I'm originally from Colombia, living in Connecticut. I have over 25 years of experience in supply chain. So my background is industrial engineering. I did a master's degree and an MBA at Georgia Tech, and I work at companies like Home Depot and Anheuser-Busch InBev, startup in ag tech, and now I've been at Cencora for about 2 years or so. So when I joined Cencora, I started the team of network modeling and optimization. This was sort of like part of the strategy to ensure that we were able to bring decisions internally. So our goal in my team is to enable the commercial plan and our customer needs by managing the capacity of the network. So pretty much I'm responsible for the capacity of the network. I kind of like summarize it in that way. And we look at capacity in the next 12 months or in the next 5 years.
Awesome. Awesome. I love to hear that. And the fact that you built that team specifically around network optimization. Now, with those particular responsibilities, what are, the one or two KPIs that kind of keep you up at night? I love this question because all of us kind of have supply chain on our minds all the time. So what are those one or two KPIs that keep you up at night?
So typically we start with service level and cost. However, the direct impact of my team is in KPIs that are sort of like a layer below, and those are storage and throughput capacity. And then I would say the KPI that keeps me up at night is, it could be either one of those two whenever they're red. So that red, like people in my team, they know that I'm very passionate, and I dig in and follow up until we turn it to green.
So if anything is red, then you are staying up all night until it gets to green.
Oh, like I dream with it. Yes.
No, that's a true supply chain leader. So one more question for you before I bring Sarah into the conversation. When you think about the challenges supply chain leaders face today, what do you think has changed the most over the past few years?
Okay. So I can think of a few. The first one is people, right? Like hiring people in our area is challenging. Why? Because like operations researchers, data scientists, computer science, industrial engineers, they like tech companies. So bringing them into Cencora, our supply chain pharmaceutical distribution company, sometimes it could be challenging. The second one is the changing microenvironment. Um, like there is changes with respect on how we need to trace our product or tariffs or any sort of disruptions in that space. The pace of innovation is
Mm.
right. The last few years, we have seen it even with AI. So we need to be able to adapt and learn and apply and implement and innovate within ourselves. And just competition and how we service our customers. Customer expectations keeps changing.
Yeah. Well, and I think the speed of innovation as well. Like you talked about technology, you talked about innovation, and I think it's really the pressure from the speed of everything changing as well. Like that to me has grown exponentially over the last couple of years, and some of us I think are sitting here going, how did we get here and how do we get there when we have to make all of these changes so quickly? All right. So, Sarah, I want to bring you into the conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Optilogic, and what your team focuses on when it comes to helping customers strengthen their supply chains?
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. First, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you and with Diana in this context. It's really exciting. So a little bit about me. I also come from an industrial engineering background. Also have a background in operations research, which is really kind of the backbone of a lot of the tools we use here at Optilogic. I come from a transportation background as well. I worked for a 3PL provider, just getting my start in the professional world. Was really interested in a lot of the tooling around that, which is what led me into the operations research space and the supply chain design technology space. And I've been in these types of roles now for over 10 years. So I've been working with Optilogic for the past 3.5 of that, and always been in a very customer facing role as part of the professional services team.
Awesome.
So to speak a little bit about what our team does. So we're embedded here at Optilogic. We have a lot of great engineering resources building a lot of our tools, and we are here to help those customers learn how to use those tools, and how to actually get those tools in the hands of the folks on teams like Diana's and be successful with them. So everything from maybe if you're brand new to Optilogic and you need some onboarding support, you need a lot of training, or even you need help building your first model and you want to hand us data and see how we actually turn that into a modeling reality, we're here to do all that. But also really high priority is making sure that your team is enabled to actually do those builds, do those analysis on your own going forward with our support when you need it.
Great. So not only do you and I have the same initials, but we also have the same background in 3PLs. I love it. I can't believe
it was meant to be. Yeah.
It was so meant to be. I'm so glad that we're doing this today. All right. So with some of those responsibilities in mind that you just mentioned, what are the one or two key metrics or outcomes that you're most focused on that will drive that value for your clients right now?
Right. So two things certainly come to mind. One is that we're often giving organizations the ability to look at things in their supply chain in a really comprehensive way for the first time. Often when I start working with the customer, someone has been looking at things from an inventory perspective. Someone's been looking at things from an outbound transportation perspective. Someone's looking at something different from the procurement side of things. And this often we're actually trying to bring all that data into one location so that when you're looking at modeling, when you're looking at making network decisions, you understand the impact on the whole network and what some of the trade-offs are. So enabling that is really exciting to be able to do. And often we're doing it for the first time for real for a customer. So that's the first thing that, is one of the just immediate high value items we bring to the table right away. The other piece I really focus on and really proud of and really focused on is what I call like the team enablement or the center of excellence enablement. our goal is to have our customers like Cencora have a center of excellence where they have talented folks that know how to put these tools to good use and are able to do this, with support on their own. Our goals are not to have us do an analysis and us tell you the result. We want you to be along for that journey, understand how it was done, and actually be able to go wield those tools on your own going forward.
Yeah. And that curates the trust, right? It's when you have
Absolutely.
that feedback loop and you've got people that you can rely on to really help you optimize the tools that you're using, and that you trust everybody involved. And we break down some of those silos so that they can trust not only the platform and the partner they're working with, but also internally as well. So when you kind of take a look at the broader supply chain landscape, what do you think has shifted most in the past few years, especially in how companies are approaching network design and resilience? I mean, we're talking about the past couple of years. I'm sure it's like completely shifted.
Right. I've been doing it long enough that yes, it's easy to say that things have definitely shifted. So I'd say one of the things is there's a bit of a mindset change. Several years ago, a lot of things used to be efficiency focused and cost focused, and that was king. And that was what everyone was very hyper focused
Right.
on. Now I think there's much better recognition that, hey, there are trade-offs to that, and there are balances that need to be struck there. And we need to not just be looking at things from that one singular perspective. If we are, say, consolidating our inventory, we might be able to lower our safety stock. But then what risk is that opening us up to? What if that ends up being something where, there is a vulnerability with having everything in that one location? So understanding that whole picture, I think that's a mindset change that has happened. Another thing that has clearly happened, and we've already alluded to this, is speed. Folks are needing and wanting answers faster and more often. So
Right.
having teams like Diana's have the ability to, be able to build a model once a year is not going to cut it anymore. Now folks are needing to take that model and say, no, I actually need to be running this every month to make sure I'm having customers pull from the right DCs, because something has happened to where maybe I can't do what I did 3 months ago. So being able to actually do that analysis and make those recommendations quickly has become extremely important. So there ends up being a lot more conversation about how do we make it to where folks can actually spin up those answers more quickly.
Yeah. 1 year to one a month. I
If not,
mean,
if not more like from like just a planning perspective of, oh, these are, if I could optimize things more often, what kind of value is there? I want to do that more, or I need to do that more because the landscape has suddenly changed. Tariffs are suddenly different.
yeah.
Now what's the most effective way to do this?
Yeah, but it just goes to show the speed at which organizations are looking to run at. And so it puts into perspective where you are in relation to other organizations, their supply chain teams, their supply chains, and also your competition. Now, I want to point out that we've already got a double fire emoji. So if you're loving the conversation, want to see some more fire emojis, plus the QR code in the top right-hand corner. If you want to click that, it will take you right to Optilogic's website and you can find out more. All right, let's get into the rest of the conversation, because I find myself having more and more conversations about the importance of breaking down silos, which I can't believe we're still talking about in 2025. And I really hope we're going to have a shift in 2026. And, because we really want to collaboratively bring different business areas together. I think that's the only way that we're going to achieve real long-term success. So, Diana, I want to start with you. I mean, you've emphasized that network strategy must be tightly linked to business strategy. Can you explain what you mean by that, and maybe share an example from your experience at Cencora?
Sure. And I might think of 2 examples, but to start, whenever we think about building a model or answering a question that we have, we start by trying to understand what is the business, what is it that the commercial team wants to achieve, what is it that we are going to satisfy the customer with. So once we gain those insights, which we can also be part of the conversation on how to build that business strategy, right? Then we start going deeper into how do we solve for that question from a supply chain perspective. So let's say if our our company's vision is to provide a healthier future.
Mhm.
And what it means is that we want to be able to provide medicine to be accessible to customers. So coverage, right? Geographic coverage, cost competitiveness is important. So the way that we think about our supply chain is that we need to be agile and we have to have very high service levels, especially, when you think about medicine, there are patients waiting for their prescriptions or their surgical rooms that they're going to have procedures. So service level is definitely top of mind. And when we translate that into our business strategy, we need to make sure that we're able to satisfy customers within a number of hours. And it could be, like next day deliveries. So we need to build our network in a way that we can accomplish that goal with the customer in mind first. So that's when we think about the entire network. There is a particular example about vaccines. So when we think about our vaccine strategy, we might be using a certain, like a different strategy than the rest of the year, just because we have a really high peak of demand during a specific time of the year, and we also need to be really quick. So as capacity surges and demand surges, we might be like shipping out of specific locations that have been identified because they do have the capacity, and then we do have the partners, shipping partners that can as well execute in the way that we need.
Yeah. And so, really, what you're talking about around those high service levels, you mentioned coverage as well, being able to be flexible and quick during peak. I mean, those are a lot of different components that can be seen, like that will need different components to reach that level of success that you're looking for. And a lot of that is dependent on vendors. You talked about your logistics service providers. You're talking about technology vendors. Like, it really is a wide web, and you have to make sure that you're working with the right people, right?
Yeah. Like whenever you mentioned that we need to break silos, this is really important because it's not just silos within our company, it's silos in the entire supply chain. So it is an end-to-end supply chain.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not only, and sometimes when we think about silos, we think about them being internal. But we also want to make sure that our partners and our vendors are somewhat integrated at some point, because you really want to make sure that the data is flowing.
Yeah. I typically talk about the digital supply chain and the physical supply chain, and they need to go together.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't talk about that enough, the physical supply chain and the digital supply chain. But thank you for sharing that. So, Sarah, from your perspective, I mean, you work with multiple companies. Why do you think that so many organizations then struggle to make this connection between business strategy and network decisions? Like, what's the most common gap you see?
Yeah, I see maybe things manifesting in a couple of ways, and they both relate back again to the silos idea that you mentioned you don't want to be talking about in 2026. Sometimes I see that, like, for a strategy, it's not truly a network strategy. Someone is, tasked with doing something that's really focused on maybe just one part of the network. They might be looking at transportation really closely and wanting to do things in a way that makes sense that way because that's what their team is getting measured on. But there's really not a connection, and just look at the whole picture instead. So, Deanna, your example about vaccines and other things that really the service level being really important, that's probably going to look bad in terms of maybe what you're spending on transportation potentially if you just look at it from that one lens. But if you have guidance to look at things in the whole picture and say, well, this is our strategy for it, it means you have to start looking outside of just that one team to be connected into that strategy. Another thing that I see at times is you might have a network strategy team that doesn't have the right plugins with the operations team. So you can do your analysis, you can come up with a suggestion, but if it's actually not connected in and backed up with insights or assumptions or buy-in from other parts of the organization, and also having that leadership in place to making sure everyone is operating from the same platform, the same strategy, that analysis is not going to end up landing with the people that actually need to go execute that strategy. It's going to be much more difficult to get the buy-in.
That is such a great point. I mean, if you're going to make decisions that are going to make sense across the organization, I mean, you got to make sure that you have access and that you're looking at all the data that you need to be able to make the right decisions. And so when
Absolutely.
we talk about still being siloed, we run so many organizational risks when we do that because you actually can't see, and I use see loosely, whether you have all the right data in front of you to make the right decisions.
Yeah, there needs to be buy-in on that strategy across the organization too. And them being part of that process early on and having connectivity with the teams that are looking and doing the analysis on those strategies and coming up with recommendations, have your input as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've been talking for a long time about the importance of data. I've been talking about this a lot. I've talked about how we need to make sure that we've got clean data and good data. We understand what bad data is. But I think what we're only recently starting to really focus on is data quality and what that looks like and why it's so important to the discussion that we're having today. And so, Diana, I want to start with you. I mean, you mentioned that data preparation can consume 80% of the time in network modeling projects. What surprised you? Because 80%, that's a lot of time. What surprised you the most about the data challenges when you started this journey at Cencora?
Sure. So I would say, just before I answer this question, maybe 19% of the time is just defining the problem,
Mm,
and then the 1% on execution. However, it has changed a lot. So as I mentioned, when I joined Cencora, we started my team. Uh, and what it meant is that the first set of models, we were starting from scratch. So we really needed to define the problem and then go look for data. One of the challenges that we had on the data as we think about an end-to-end supply chain is that the sourcing item or unit was different than the inventory item or unit. And then we have a picking unit from operation and a transportation unit. And then we're saying, how do we standardize a unit across the entire supply chain? So ensuring that we were able to translate and come into a standards was, I think, one of the most challenging items.
yes.
Another one is just how we look about, how do we look at time? Some people think about days or hours or months. So whenever we're going to run an annual model or a weekly model, like how do we get to that conclusion? So it definitely took quite a long time. And I would say we didn't really have at the time a data lake with the data clean, organized, with pipelines that we could refresh the data on an ongoing basis. Things have changed now, but definitely, like from an 80%, maybe we're down to a 30%, but with a lot of effort.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a lot of effort to really understand what that data looks like, what you have available, what is possible, and how you can bring it all together, but making sure that the quality is there as well. And this sort of brings me to my next question of Sarah, because I speak to a lot of organizations, a lot of supply chain leaders. They often tell us, I think their data really isn't perfect. And so they're hesitant to start, but I almost feel like everybody's in the same boat with that, right? What's your advice to companies who feel a little bit paralyzed by imperfect data?
So I love this question because I have an answer because I've had this conversation before. So I've worked on a lot of customer engagements over the year, and typically the first thing I hear when we kick off the engagement is, "So our data's not great." And an apology, which is it's
Yeah,
like, okay, everyone's in the same. I mean, it's you are not the exception by far,
right.
but that absolutely should not stop you. For one, I know you have data. Also, the fact that you're going on this journey and you're trying to pull data from lots of different parts of the organization, like Diana, your example of, wait, what is a unit? It depends on what department we look
Right.
at, what a unit is. You
Mhm.
might be the first team really looking at that in a centralized way. And just the act of doing that is starting to bring a lot of value before you even start getting into the modeling part of it. Okay, it's effort up front for sure, but it's going to pay dividends too outside the modeling effort as well. That, if it results in there being a data lake where this is all centralized, you aren't going to be the only team that's going to be seeing value from the effort that's been put into that. So absolutely don't let that stop you. It's something to expect, though, if this is the first time you're actually pooling your data in one model and needing to pull things from all parts of the organization and make sure they're reconciled and harmonized and it's good quality, that the model's not going to be the only thing to benefit from that, but expect that that's going to be part of the journey and the journey of discovery. And there's going to be other, bonuses that come out of doing that. And then as far as things like, yes, there will be gaps. There will be some kind of a gap. Transportation cost is a really common gap where we say, oh, well, I know this much. I know that we had this much product move between location A and B, but I'm really not sure what the cost of it is. That's where there are tools and techniques to help bridge those gaps. So, I mean, that's a standard part of a project for us to say, oh, there's going to be data gaps. I understand that. Let's look at your other history. Let's look at benchmarks from around the industry. Let's look at what's typical. Let's talk about what different modes you're moving. And we can plug in some intelligent assumptions that aren't going to, it might not perfectly match history, but we're also doing with models where we're going to be looking at future variability of things as well and need to be making predictions. So it absolutely shouldn't stop you. There are tools and techniques to fill in the gaps when we run into them.
I love that. I love the fact that you said that a lot of people apologize
Yes, it's a lot of I'm sorry and
for the quality of the data. I'm sorry that it's not perfect. And I always use this sentiment of progress over perfection. I think it really stands true here in the fact that we just need to progress with the data to a point where it's actually usable and in a place where you've asked all the right questions over perfection, and that we shouldn't get too caught up in the fact that we might not be as far ahead as we think that we should. I mean, it just goes to show that we all sort of get into our head about these different things, and we don't need to, right? Everybody's in the same boat and we all have to start somewhere, and we have to start. There's like no room for being paralyzed anymore. We really need to have to start and move forward with it. So Diana, how did you get buy-in from subject matter experts across transportation, operations, and some of the other functions to participate in the data gathering and validation process? Because I think it's one thing that Sarah mentioned that, that we're apologizing ahead of time. It's another to have to go to everybody internally and say, hey, we're going to be asking all these questions of your data. We're going to be exposing some truths. Get on board with us,
Mm-hmm. So an example is when I joined Cencora, we started working on a 5-year plan. And I really like to start the cycle running the long-term projects because it kind of like sets the tone on how the network model team, it's, it's going to operate kind of like mirroring the business cycle, right? So initially we identified a gap in our long-term plan, and the gap was, analyzed at a very high level. Once we did that, we came to our steering committee, which I think that is super powerful the way that, like Cencora is organized, because we're able to escalate to different leadership teams what insights we're getting from the data. Since we were pointing out a gap and it required the other teams to get involved, the leadership team agreed and aligned among ourselves who needed to participate and why. So we had a big why, and we always need to start with that, the big why. So in that way, the leadership team was on board, and then bringing the rest of the SMEs or the leaders of the different business areas was a lot easier because we had a common goal that we needed to close together, right? I think the culture at Cencora is also unique because we're servicing our customers and patients, and we have this responsibility of creating a healthier future. The way that we operate within ourselves and within our with our stakeholders seems to be a lot more closer than either in other companies. Like if I need something, like there is a reason, and we talk about the why, and we ensure that we bring people along. So having that support from the steering committee, bringing the leaders of each one of these teams on board, really help get the data, because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, so what do you need from me, right? So yeah, it's the data. But some other things that we do is just ensure that we have a project plan and an understanding of what we need to do when and who needs to be involved.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. I'm really glad to hear that everybody was, on board for all of those questions and looking into the data and who needed to provide what. I think it's, culturally really important to have that why that you were talking about, that everybody's striving and working towards, and that makes a really big difference. I mean, I heard this before, any technology implementation is only 20% technology, it's 80% people, change management, and culture. And so I think that's so important. Now, we touched on hesitation. I think another reason that teams struggle to make a start is their ever growing and changing list of priorities. I mean, I don't know how supply chain leaders are doing it on a daily basis. There's so many different things that are coming at them. And Diana, I know you're dealing with constant requests like capacity questions, transportation optimization, inventory strategy, business continuity planning. I mean, these are probably just a few of the things that you're dealing with on a daily basis. With so many possible use cases, how do you decide what to tackle first? How do you sort of put those into priority?
So we created a monthly routine, and then we have a meeting, and we call it the monthly capacity review, where we look at all the different inputs and requests that happen during that month. Just because, like there could be some conflict between requests, and if they come together, it might not work. So we might require some time to ensure that we can manage the entire network. If there are things, of course, that take precedence and need to be solved right away, like we'll prioritize them. But typically we try to aggregate a lot of different requests and then just understand the impact of those requests across the network. When we come to this monthly meeting, then we advise on like what risk we have, what opportunities we have, and then we really are looking to prioritize based on the customer. So our customer always goes first.
Great. Sarah, I want to bring you into this because I think you also see, organizations struggling with prioritization. Where do we start? What does that look like? How then do you and your team help those teams figure out where to focus? Because I'm sure that is, we want to build partnerships. We want to build relationships. And I think that's a really great place to start.
Yeah, I think this is a really great question because, a lot of times with these journeys, you have this capability in a team that's able to answer these questions, and they have tools that are designed to do exactly that, give them the ability to answer a wide swath of questions. And then the, I'll air quotes, problem that then comes is that there's a lot of requests, a lot of things that people would like you to look at and have needed someone to look at. And there's excitement about, oh, something's in place. The team is able to look at this. And then that's kind of almost the warning we give is like, this is a problem you're going to run into, is that list is going to be really long. And how do you prioritize it? And it sounds like, Diana, this is part of the monthly process, that it's a two-way conversation. There's requests that come in, and then there's insights your team can give to say, okay, well, so this is going to be the lift to answer that question. This is going to be, the effort that it's going to require. Here's maybe what I can tell you about the data quality we have in this area versus that area. And so infusing that intelligence and having the two-way conversation about understanding the effort is really important. I think it's important too to do some quick high-level assessment about the potential impact too. You want to look at this question, and a lot of people have a feeling they want to look at a question. Let's say inventory. For some industries, someone will feel inventory is too high. Okay, well, let's take a look at that. If we were able to reduce it, what's even a rough realistic number? How much is that? Well, how much does that compare to transportation or other costs we have in the network? That should then also be helping drive priorities. maybe it's high, it's high level of effort and there's not much, like the potential of what you're going to uncover there is maybe not very much. So maybe that shifts it and says that's not the biggest priority. That isn't what we should be looking at right now.
Right. Right. I love that communication, that two-way, right? You're asking me this. I'm going to have to put something aside to be able to prioritize this for you. How important is it? And have we asked the right questions? Right? Like how much of
Right.
those questions that you're asking of the team baked into data that you're receiving, or is it really
Mhm.
just a gut feeling?
Right. Yes. And that happens a lot. That
Mhm.
and you'll notice it too, because suddenly the priorities next month are super, super different. And then the thing that was asked about next month maybe isn't on the table anymore. It's maybe a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Mhm.
it's all about asking the right questions, but also making sure that the questions that we're asking are baked into or have, data components to it that make it something that we really need to tackle right at this very moment. Now, Diana, can you tell us about the $300 million efficiency challenge? How did you land on that target and what does it mean? And how are you thinking about achieving it?
Okay, so I was having a conversation with my boss, and I asked him, like, like I need a target, right? And then don't take it as like this is a Cencora target, 300 million or so, but it's mostly for my team and my immediate stakeholders. So so the way that I think about this efficiency, which is the way that I have done it in the past, is that when we think about our LRP or the long-term plan, we need to offset certain cost increases. So it could be labor, it could be transportation, or it could be other things that are happening in the network that we need to look into from an efficiency perspective. So we did some math, and super high level is actually a little bit higher than 300. But I feel pretty confident that when we start thinking about efficiencies and challenging ourselves, we're gonna most likely find the ways to get there. And it's it's like it's like a push in our brain to ensure that we're just not modeling, like to have fun. It is fun, but like there is an end goal to ensure that we're bringing value to the company. And identifying efficiencies can be done not just by network modeling, also by simulation, but also under my team. I am responsible for emerging technology. So we might be able to bring other ways of solving problems uh, to create those efficiencies.
Awesome. And I like the fact that you broke it down as to how you came up with that number, because sometimes, when supply chain teams are looking to create KPIs or goals, or what does that look like for an organization? How do we come up with that? Where do we start? What does that look like? So I think you've really given us a lot to think about as far as the conversation that we want to have it internally. Now we're starting to get some questions in the comments. If you have any questions for today's guest, please make sure to put those in the comments because we are going to get to that soon. Although we still have so much to get to. Now, I want to talk about, we've already talked about linking strategies, data, prioritization, but to make all of that happen successfully over time, we need scalability. And that quite often is a big challenge for businesses. So Diana, what does scaling supply chain decision making mean to you?
So scaling decision making means that we can grow the scope of what we do, of the analyses and the insights that we can bring to the leadership team to make decisions, right? Um, like I work at a startup company, and we typically think of bringing products from 0 to 1. So that was probably our first year. We were testing, we were piloting, we were building models, we were building pipelines for the data, presenting our results, and really ensuring that we develop a framework. Now we're at a moment that we can scale. Why? Because we have a framework, we have a data links, we have presented results, and as a company, we have gotten the buy-in from our stakeholders and we're ready to scale. And what it means is that we might be able to expand our scope.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it means different things to different people. And so I want to bring Sarah into this part of the conversation because you work with a lot of organizations that are at different stages of maturity. And so in your opinion, based on what Diana just said, what separates companies who successfully scale their network modeling capabilities? What does scaling supply chain decision making mean to them? And why are they still struggling?
I think actually Diana mentioned getting a framework in place, and having the time and the space to get that framework in place is so important, because right at that point, once you have it, then you can really scale what you can do with it. So going on this journey for the first time, gathering the data, understanding the data, coming up with methodologies to fill in the gaps, getting the subject matter expertise buy-in, that all takes time and investment to get into that. But then when you have a framework in place and you have all that understanding, then you can have process, then you can have repeatable processes. You can make it where maybe you're not spending 80% of the time generating the model again. You're not starting from scratch. But a lot of times, if folks are just trying to firefight all the time and everything is being done from scratch every single time, and priorities keep changing, and you don't have the leadership directive saying like, hey, we're going to make a long-term investment in this, which means that we can scale and ask more questions more quickly and know we're getting quality answers. That's the gap quite often, is the priorities change too quickly. We can't actually invest in that framework, and then you're not able to scale.
And you're not giving the teams enough time to do what they need to do for that priority before shifting it. And so it's a little bit of, I don't know if it's organized chaos or a little bit of chaos. And with all the disruptions that are happening right now, that's the last thing we need, right? So I love the fact that we were talking about modeling. Now, I don't think that we can talk about anything in supply chain without talking about AI. So we're going to talk about it. And we absolutely can't talk about scaling decision-making without talking about that technology piece, the AI piece. So Diana, how are you thinking about AI in the context of network optimization? Like, where are you using it today? Where do you see the opportunity?
Okay. So where I see the opportunity is improving our inputs. And Sarah Butler mentioned one of the parts of network modeling is that we need to forecast the future. So today, many of our inputs and many of our assumptions are deterministic, meaning that we might assume an X% growth year over year, right? But where I see AI and where we're going to be piloting is really to understand how can we improve those assumptions. So you can always take historical information and kind of like project it in the future. But nowadays, you're able to link external data or additional insights from other sources. And when you combine it all together and create some sort of heuristics, it's really going to improve all of our models. And, like hopefully it's not super complicated. And I think that having some clarity on what we want to do in a very simple way, it's going to be key so that we can improve our models little by little.
Yeah.
I will also say, like internally, we not necessarily talk about a digital twin. We talk about digital models. There might be certain definitions, right, that are out there. And within these digital models, there is so much opportunity for AI. And I would say Optilogic already has some what is that, like live tools that we use to clean our data or to ask questions. So we do have a lot of interactions specifically with this tool that help us streamline the time and the effort that we have to spend under the network modeling area.
Yeah, and you've chosen specific areas to really wrap your heads around where AI can make the difference. And like you said, piloting. I think piloting and testing and figuring out where it makes the most sense for your organization is really, really, really key here. But you've really chosen a few key areas to focus, and you've chosen a partner to be able to focus some of those areas on. So, Sarah, what do you think that executives know about AI in supply chain decision making, both the realistic near-term application and what's coming next? Like, what should they know about? What do we what do we need to look out for in our day-to-days? I almost think like red flags. Like what's the red flag of, oh, this is where we could potentially use AI to help us with our supply chain decision making?
Right. There are kind of two key points I think are worth bringing up around that. And one is that not necessarily is that you always have to have a human component, right? This isn't about taking what your modelers and your analysts and your supply chain experts are doing and getting rid of them and putting an AI tool just interchange in place of them. That's
Right.
not really where the value is. You still need someone that is doing the human oversight to it to make sure that it's giving you an intelligent answer. It's kind of touching on that piloting point again. I think the opportunities are certainly huge in all the spaces it could be applied. Diana, you talked about inputs, but outputs, insight, and processing, and being able to understand that more quickly and synthesize those results more quickly. It can help with all those pieces. But right, you still need a human to actually be curating exactly what's going on there and leveraging that tool and interpreting the outputs and saying, this looks like what I'm looking for, or no, that does not look quite right. Hold on, we need to try this again and improve upon it. I also think those tools need to have subject matter experts behind them and involved in their development, which is something that Optilogic is really interested to be continuing to be a part of. Not any LLM is necessarily going to be something you can throw at a supply
Right.
chain or model build problem, but what Optilogic is bringing to the table is, okay, you want to build models and you want to build them faster. Let's get you tools to enable you to do that and leverage AI because it's such a powerful option to be using.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about people. Like you brought that in, and I'm glad that you did, because I said a little bit earlier that 80% of any implementation really is people. So what advice then, Sarah, would you give organizations about team structure, skills? Like what does a successful network strategy team really look like?
So a successful network strategy team is one that is a team and not just one person in a room doing the analysis,
Right.
which I unfortunately do see sometimes that
Mm.
sometimes they bring on a capability and they bring on an expert and they say, okay, you're going to use this tool. And then they talk about, I feel like I'm on an island, which is not a fun place to be. It really needs to be something where that's connected in with leadership. They need managers and directors, folks like Diana, that are able to bridge that connection between, well, what's the business strategy and how does that then affect our priorities? And also someone like Diana that has the skill set to do that, but also really understand what the tool is doing, which she's absolutely fantastic at being in that role to say, I understand what this analyst is able to do and the tools that they're using and able to do that interpretation. So yeah, having that team in place is so important. It needs to not just be one person that's given a tool and then not given any direction and any support.
Yeah, making sure that it's collaborative and they have access to be able to provide their thoughts, their perspectives, share some feedback behind it, get creative, get innovative, because that's really how you're going to grow, not only as an organization, but whoever you're going to partner with on that as well, right? Well, I want to get to some of our audience questions because I think that we've got some really great ones in the comments. And then I want to leave a little bit more time at the end to see what you want to leave everybody with. So for Diana, we've got a question. You mentioned needing faster answers to align with business investment cycles. How long did it take from adopting Optilogic to seeing usable insights? And how did that speed change internal conversations? Great question.
So I have a team of experts. Like I'm just so lucky that my team is just so incredible, and I'm so thankful for them. Our like first model, even before this big model on the 5-year plan, because we had knowledge and we had expertise, and we like you don't have to create a super in-depth detailed model with every SKU every day of the year, but we can aggregate data and create very high level models. I would say probably a few months was how long it took us with our initial model. And then from there, you kind of like keep iterating. Like your first model, you want to test certain things, you want to make sure that you understand the logic, and then you can start adding more and more details. It's sort of like a flywheel. The more details that you put in, the more outputs that you're going to get on the and insights, and then those insights will help ask better questions that then are going to turn into inputs, and then it just is a cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure that everybody knows the QR code in the top right. Make sure to grab that. We've also put some really good links to some resources along the same lines that Diana is talking about prompts and LLMs and AI and things like that. So go and check the comments for those. Now, Sarah, I have a question for you from the audience. How do you advise companies that are still relying heavily on consultants for supply chain design, but want to start building internal capability? Where should they begin?
So I think that it's important to have the right partner for that because, right, there are companies that, are very focused on doing the analysis, but there also could be resources, and I'm proud to be part of a team that is very focused on this type of model to say, yes, I'm going to be, capable and I'm happy and excited to do this type of analysis and help bring insights, but I want to bring your capabilities along the way. So it should be a partnership in that sense that I am building up your COE. I'm teaching your wonderful teammates like what Diana has on her team. They are fabulous, by the way. I can vouch for that. She has a fantastic team. But yeah, building those capabilities and making it to where you can have a partner that can jump in and move quickly to maybe do some analysis quickly to bring value quickly, but is also bringing the team at the client up to speed, bringing them along for the journey, have them super involved on the data processing part of it, understanding what steps you're taking, having them involved in getting things validated, being with them when they're reading it back to subject matter experts saying, this is what we're seeing in the data. Are y'all aligned with it or not? So being there along the journey and it not being a black box is super critical. So if you can find that right partner, I think it's absolute, very doable reality. Sorry, go ahead, Diana.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and very like the way I would recommend going about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to add there, we did have a partner that helped us jumpstart our capability. And something that is really key for me when we're working with partners developing capabilities is that the company, so like Cencora, we own the model. It's not that the consulting company walk away with the details on the model and we're just left with a PowerPoint presentation. No, it's right. Like we were working along the way, as Sarah mentioned, and we had on hands in that model so that the knowledge transfer was there at 100%.
That is such a great point because sometimes we lose sight of that when we're going into a project like that, and we want to make sure that everybody has access to that knowledge and the knowledge transfer and making sure that you actually own that model as well. I think that's super important. One last question, I think, from the audience. So Diana, can you share, these are such great questions, by the way. Can you share more about your move towards continuous optimization? What's enabled that shift and what results are you seeing?
So being able to go from a 5-year plan model to the 1-year plan to now monthly, and if we wanted to run it weekly, we can, but just having consistency on the process, the methodology, the data that we have, and ensuring that we can go from a macro perspective to a micro perspective really helps with the speed. So like it's all about the questions that we want to answer and the decisions that we need to make. So we might have some business continuity events and we need to make some decisions. It might be isolated, it might be a specific region, it might be a certain SKUs. But in our 5-year plan, we're really considering the entire country and the entire network. So it's really being able to determine what needs to be solved now and be able just to isolate the question that we need to answer.
And it goes back to priorities. It goes back to that monthly meeting that you were talking about and making sure that everybody's aligned within those priorities and making sure that you focus, right? You have a focus, you know what you're doing, you know that what you're working towards. And I think that that's so important. Plus, having a feedback loop is really important to that as well. So I appreciate you for sharing that. All right. I want to get to a couple more questions for both of you. I want to know what we want to leave the audience with, because I always love leaving the audience with a takeaway or an action item or something like that. So Diana, as you think about your journey so far at Cencora, what's one lesson learned you'd share with other supply chain leaders just starting to build or scale these capabilities?
Something that has worked for me is creating a vision of the future and sharing that vision with the rest of the company. So we might have our Cencora vision, right? We want to create healthier futures. But then as a supply chain, what do we want? And we do talk about the supply chain of the future that needs to be agile and resilient and cost effective and provide the service that our customers need. So I might initially have not defined the KPIs of that supply chain of the future, but just macro level, it really has brought people together, not just from the business side, like operations, but also from IT and commercial. And then we talk about the network of the future. And it was amazing. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago that my HR partner was talking about the supply chain of the future.
Yes.
And it makes me happy because it is really resonating that we can always do things better. And it could be a year from now, or it could be 5 years from now. But if you set that vision, you're really bringing people together. You don't know all the answers, but you're gonna find them together.
Isn't that a fun way to think about and be a part of supply chain? You know, if anything was possible, what do you want your supply chain to look like? And having your team sort of dream and get creative and think innovatively and come to the table with everything that they would want to see, and then having that discussion as to what actually is possible today and what you want to work towards in the future. I love that. I think that's such great advice. Now, Sarah, you work with dozens of organizations. What do you think is the one most common mistake you see companies make, and how can they avoid it?
I think actually my answer to this is going to align really well with everything Diana was just describing, in that leadership is such a key part of this. I mentioned that island, and sometimes someone is being handed this tool and then they're kind of by themselves, and there's no one there to actually have a vision for why are we doing this, and actually distill that information to the other parts of the organization and bring them on board. I mean, that's such a wonderful story with Cencora, that there's other parts of the organization that know this term, the supply chain of the future, that they're cognizant of it. I mean, that shows how much buy-in there is for it, and across the organization. It's because the leadership is in place driving that. So I think that's the biggest mistake I see made. Folks invest in the tools, and they maybe invest in a talent that can do the technical part of it, but you also need support in place from a leadership position to actually turn that into reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Such great advice. Now, I have a question for both of you before we go, and I just want one piece of advice really quick. What's one piece of advice you would give to a VP of supply chain who's being asked to do more with less, move faster, and prove ROI quickly? Sarah, actually, you know what, Diana, I'm going to start with you, and then Sarah, you can go second.
Okay, so do more with less. I think that this happens like every day. Like in supply chain, and move faster. Totally. I would say you can isolate in a way the problem that you've been asked to solve, right? Like, and the angle that you want to take. So defining the problems, spending time defining what is it that they need to achieve, is where I will advise a VP of supply chain that needs to make improvements to spend the time. You might be able to understand your current state and then what's going to happen in the future, but how do you approach it, and how do you define that problem is going to be the first thing that you need to think of.
That's great advice. All right, Sarah, what's your one piece of advice?
Yeah, it'd maybe be a word of caution in understanding the trade-offs of maybe a quick win in terms of what it might look like from a budget standpoint versus what capabilities you might be losing. I mean, I imagine that Diana can quantify the value that her team has brought to the organization in terms of insights, in terms of savings. And it did invest, it did require upfront investment, but has, I'm sure, paid dividends in the end for it. So to be cognizant of that yes, there is this push to do things quickly in short terms, but understand before you're modifying something and cutting something, like if you're actually cutting something that's bringing a lot of value to the organization.
Awesome. Great advice. Now the QR code is back up there. If you want to request a demo from Optilogic, make sure to grab that right now. We've also put some really great resources in the comments today, so grab those links as well. But that's all we have time for. Thank you so much to all of you that joined us, and a big thank you to Diana and Sarah for joining me today. I mean, what an enjoyable discussion. We've really dug deep. You've shared so many insights and examples, and I can't wait to hear how our audience today are going to take some of those back to their own businesses, their own supply chains, their own supply chain teams. I think there's going to be a lot of improved decision making happening very, very soon. So if you're looking for a partner to help you transform how your business makes supply chain decisions, well, check out optilogic.com or grab that QR code before we go. Thank you again to everybody who joined us. Thank you again to Diana and Sarah, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.